Why America is entering a horrific financial crisis. America is currently on the verge of a financial catastrophe, having formerly been the shining example of economic strength and stability. The nation may be facing a catastrophe unlike any it has ever experienced as a result of years of unrestrained borrowing, rising inflation, and widening income disparity. The underpinnings of American prosperity are becoming more precarious as the country's national debt soars above $33 trillion and inflation erodes consumers' purchasing power. Among the indicators that the nation is on the verge of financial collapse are rising interest rates, a declining value of the dollar, and a faltering housing market. Global trade disputes and an unsustainable fiscal policy are just two of the many issues plaguing the U.S. economy. It is increasingly evident that the nation's economic stability is under grave danger as these forces come together. Every American may be affected profoundly by this crisis, which is being driven by a confluence of international instability and internal poor management. 1. Unsustainable fiscal policies and the nation's mounting debt. The huge amount of America's national debt, more than $33 trillion, represents a concerning proportion of the nation's GDP. Government spending skyrocketed as the country tried to stabilize the economy following the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 outbreak. But because of this vast borrowing, the United States is now paying huge amounts of interest, which is severely taxing the federal budget. The long-term effects of such debt have not been sufficiently addressed by the fiscal policies of the United States government, which has continuously relied on deficit spending. Instead of reducing expenditure or putting practical debt reduction plans into place, the United States keeps borrowing, which feeds the debt cycle. Investors may eventually start to doubt the sustainability of U.S. debt, which would cause them to lose faith in U.S. Treasury bonds. The national debt crisis might worsen if borrowing became more costly due to a major drop in America's credit rating or a decline in investor confidence. 2. Uncontrolled inflation. The United States inflation rate has risen to levels not seen in many years. Real earnings stagnated as the cost of living continued to rise as a result of the significant increase in inflation from 2020 to 2022, which peaked at almost 9%. The cost of basic necessities like food, housing, and electricity has increased dramatically, affecting the spending power of the typical American. Inflation is still an issue, despite the Federal Reserve's relentless interest rate hikes, which have only partially succeeded in controlling it. The strain is being felt by regular Americans, even if official inflation figures may not always fully reflect the degree of growing expenditures. Inflationary pressures are still being fueled by labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, and growing energy prices. The dangers of unemployment and recession remain significant even as the Fed hikes rates to combat inflation. Reduced consumer spending, a slowdown in economic growth, and a general drop in the standard of life could result from inflation continuing to exceed earnings. 3. The effect of increasing interest rates on debt. Over the past few years, the Federal Reserve has hiked interest rates several times in response to skyrocketing inflation. Although the goal of this action is to reduce inflation, consumers, businesses, and the economy as a whole will be greatly impacted. Borrowing becomes more costly with higher interest rates, especially for those who have credit card debt, auto loans, and mortgages. Customers will consequently have less money to spend, which will cause demand to decline. Businesses are also impacted by the growing cost of debt, especially those with significant leverage. Higher financing prices may force businesses to make fewer investments and lay off employees. Due to the exponential increase in debt servicing costs, the U.S. government's debt load becomes increasingly more unmanageable as interest rates climb. The financial crisis might worsen, and a full-blown recession could be triggered if the Fed keeps hiking rates in an effort to contain inflation. 4. The loss of global dominance of the US dollar. The US dollar has long served as the main reserve currency of the world, giving the United States distinct advantages in international trade and finance. But the dollar's hegemony is starting to show signs of weakness. A number of countries are now discussing trade agreements in currencies other than the dollar, and countries like China and Russia have been diversifying their foreign reserves away from the dollar. In an effort to lessen their dependency on the dollar, emerging markets are also looking to alternative currencies, such as the Chinese yuan. 5. The housing market is declining. Once a hallmark of wealth, the U.S. housing market is now exhibiting signals of fragility. Low loan rates and the need for extra space during the epidemic drove a spike in property values, but as mortgage rates climb, the trend has begun to reverse. Many Americans can no longer afford homeownership as a result of the steep rate increase, which has caused the housing market to slow down. Property prices are likely to decline, and property sales have decreased. The whole economy may be significantly impacted if the property market slows down. A drop in demand could result in job losses in the building sector. 6. Jobless knees and increasing income. Inequality. The U.S. labor market faces several difficulties, even though the official unemployment rate is quite low. While real wages have stagnated or even decreased for some sectors of the economy, many Americans are working numerous part-time jobs simply to make ends meet. Despite offering some flexibility, the gig economy sometimes has lower job security and fewer benefits. Growing discontent with the economy is a result of more Americans finding it difficult to keep up with bills as the cost of living rises. At the same time, the United States is experiencing historically high levels of income disparity. The wealth gap between the richest and poorest Americans is still growing, with many members of the working class experiencing financial difficulty, while a small number of billionaires hold the majority of the wealth. 7. Trade wars and global economic uncertainty. Because the entire economy is interrelated, a financial crisis in one region of the world may have repercussions that affect the economy of the United States. The global trade system is experiencing major disruptions as a result of growing trade tensions, especially between the United States and China. Inflation has already been exacerbated by the installation of trade restrictions and tariffs, which have raised the price of goods and raw resources. In addition, the global economy is dealing with a number of issues, such as supply chain interruptions, geopolitical conflicts, and the COVID-19 pandemic's economic effects. These elements are making it more difficult for customers to obtain reasonably priced goods and for businesses to run effectively. In conclusion, a number of variables are coming together to threaten the economic stability of the United States at this crucial juncture. A financial catastrophe appears likely as a result of a number of factors, including unmanageable debt, growing inflation, and the decline in the value of the US dollar internationally. The magnitude of the difficulties ahead necessitates quick attention and major structural adjustments. America may face its biggest financial disaster in history if the correct choices are not taken in the next years, which will be pivotal in deciding the nation's financial future. Let us know in the comments what you think about the why America is entering a horrific financial crisis, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more captivating content on our YouTube channel.